In almost any system of human thought, you'll find a single, unquestioned premise: causality. The idea that A strikes B and B moves, a chronological sequence of cause and effect. This assumption crosses almost all boundaries. Whether you look at empirical science mapping the Big Bang, or orthodox theology arguing for intelligent design, both rely entirely on the concept of a prior cause initiating a subsequent effect. In Vedantic philosophy, this literal belief in a sequential creation is called Shrishti Drishti. It is the cognitive stance that the universe was produced, generated, or born from something else. But the 8th century philosopher Gaudapada rejects this entirely. He argues that causality is logically incoherent. Reality, he proposes, looks less like a timeline of events and more like an unmoving, static plane. He called this framework Ajatavada, the doctrine of absolute non-origination. To break the term down, A denotes negation, Jati means birth or creation, and Vada means theory, the theory of no birth. Gaudapada takes this to its absolute limit. If the mechanism of cause and effect breaks down under logical scrutiny, then the universe as we perceive it was never actually created. This is not a theological claim demanding faith. Gaudapada approaches the problem through formal logic, systematically dismantling every possible theory of how something could be created. His primary targets were dualistic schools like Sankhya and Nyaya Vaiseshika, which spent centuries arguing over the exact mechanics of how the material world was produced. His arguments are recorded in the Mandukya Kataka. Using Swami Nikhilananda's translation, we can examine exactly how Gaudapada deconstructs the opponent's view. He focuses directly on the relationship between cause and effect, known in Sanskrit as karya karana. To successfully defend the idea of creation, an opponent has to prove a highly specific mechanism: how an entity can transition from a state of non-existent into a state of existence. If that transition is mathematically and logically impossible, the entire structure collapses. The created world is revealed to be an appearance in consciousness. This diagram illustrates Gaudapada's decision tree for testing causality. If an object is created, it must arise from one of two states, either from something that exists, sat, or from something that does not exist, asat. We will test the second branch first. Can an existent entity be produced by something entirely non-existent? By definition, a non-entity has no causal power. A logical impossibility, like a square circle, cannot cause a real event. From nothing, nothing comes. That leaves the first branch. Can an existent entity be produced by an already existent entity? Here we encounter a paradox of redundancy. If an effect is fully contained within its cause, it already exists, so it doesn't need to be born. Trying to create what is present is mathematically meaningless, like lighting a candle that is already burning. The karya karana mechanism fails both tests. Since something cannot come from nothing and cannot be born out of its own pre-existence, the concept of birth is logically invalid.
A common counter-argument is that causality isn't a single event, but a beginningless chain. A causes B, B causes C, stretching back endlessly. In logic, this is known as anavasta, or infinite regress. This diagram shows the flaw in that defense. If every single cause requires a prior cause to validate it, the entire system lacks an independent anchor. You have a chain of dependencies that never actually grounds itself in reality. A system built entirely on infinite dependencies is ontologically hollow. Without a primary root cause, the entire chain collapses. At this point, the natural objection arises: if the world was never created, why does it feel so consistent and physically solid to us? Gaudapada answers this by comparing the waking state, called Vishva, directly with the dream state, Taijasa. Consider the subjective experience of a dream. While inside it, you experience genuine thirst and you drink water that obeys the rules of physics. The objects feel perfectly solid to the subject perceiving them. But when you wake up, you realize the water and the thirsty person weren't physically manufactured. No physical atoms were rearranged in your brain to build them. They were simply vibrations within your consciousness. Gaudapada argues that the waking world operates on the exact same subject-object architecture as the dream. The feeling of solidity is present in both states, making them structurally identical in how they present reality to an observer. To explain this, Gaudapada uses an analogy in the final chapter of the Karika, the Alatashanti Prakarana, or the quenching of the firebrand. Imagine a single glowing coal at the end of a stick. When held perfectly still, it is just a single point of light. But if you move that stick rapidly in a circle, it generates the appearance of a continuous, complex geometric shape. The crucial insight here is that the circle was never born from the point of light. The coal did not produce or create a second entity called a circle. The circle is nothing more than the original point appearing in motion. When the motion stops, the circle doesn't die, it simply ceases to appear. Gaudapada applies this directly to the universe. The diversity of galaxies, planets, and people are not created things waiting to be destroyed. They are the apparent motion of a single, uncaused consciousness. Under this framework, enlightenment is not the achievement of a new spiritual state, nor is it escaping a created universe. It is the realization of Paramartha, the highest truth. It is simply the recognition that you are the unmoving point, not the flickering circle. In the philosophy of Gaudapada, there is no birth, no death, and no creation. There is only the infinite, uncaused presence of the unborn.